Hello and welcome to the latest edition of the Urban Bourbon Hour. Tonight I'm going to be going live with Reitz, who is a really cool guy. He's a restaurateur, owns restaurants, owns Jack Rudy Cocktail Company, which we'll talk about. And here is Brooks now.
Hey,
Hey, Brooks.
how you doing?
I am doing well. Let me just adjust this so my top of my head isn't cut off. How are you?
I'm doing great, thank you. Happy Thursday.
Yes, happy Thursday. We're getting
I'm
closer to the
doing very
weekend.
well. Yeah, can't wait. Here, I'm gonna put on my headphones like you've got
Great.
so you can hear me better. Let's see. All right, can you hear me?
Lots of people hopping in here. Yeah, I can hear you well.
Brilliant. Nice to
All
meet
right.
you electronically.
Nice to meet you, Brooks. Whoops. I appreciate you taking the time, taking the time to do this. I know you're a busy guy, so it's fun to have you and very much appreciate it.
Oh, of course, yeah. I'm honored to be on. Thank you for inviting me. I'm always excited about an opportunity to talk about what we're doing with Jack Rudy, and I feel like we're 10 years in, but if I can, if I can meet one or two new customers with these kind of things, then it's worth it. So I'm always happy to talk cocktails.
Yeah, that's awesome. It's kind of been the thing to do here over the past year, right? Like, do types of things like this just even to connect to people because of how terrible this past year has been. But these have been kind of like the bright spots of, this whole situation is these opportunities to connect with people that, maybe you never would have come across. So
That's so
I
true.
find it to be super fun just from my perspective of meeting people like you and people from distilleries and stuff all around the country. Um,
Yeah, I have a lot of new digital friends this year, I would say.
yes, I have more digital friends over the past year than I could ever imagine that I would ever make. But I want to talk a little bit about. I think you're a really interesting guy. Like I came across, of course, I knew Jack Rudy Cocktail Company, and I think somehow just buying your products and like I think just recently being, on the website and just on the internet and Instagram, I figured out, oh, Brooks is the founder of Jack Rudy. So that's why I wanted to reach out to you. And I listened to some other podcasts and things you've been on, and I think you have an interesting background that led you to, where you are at this point. Can you tell us a little bit about, like where did you come from?
Yeah, sure. Yeah, well, I am in the restaurant business and in the customer or consumer packaged goods business. So it's an interesting. Each day is rich and varied for me. But I was born in Kentucky, born and raised. So of course you're a bourbon enthusiast. So I grew up in the western part of Kentucky, and I wouldn't say that bourbon country was in my backyard, but it's runs through your veins if you live
Yeah.
in Kentucky. So, um, and I see my dad was watching tonight, so he could attest. Every time I'm home, bourbon is a part of the celebration.
Sure.
So I come from Kentucky. I moved to Charleston about 12 years ago, and I worked in restaurants my whole life since I was 16, and graduated college and went to work in the restaurant industry several years managing, and then moved to Charleston. I had read about Fig and wanted to work there, and so moved here and got a job at Fig. And really, my intention and my goal was always I wanted to open a restaurant of my own. I wasn't entirely sure how, because I knew that took money, but and I didn't have any. Um, but I love the restaurant business, and now I feel like I'm a little bit removed from it because I'm running Jack Rudy with my business partner day to day now. It's gotten so busy, but I was a restaurant guy through and through, and while I was at the restaurant, I started making my own cocktail mixers. Fortunately for me, it was right around the time that the cocktail boom was sort of permeating cities and states outside of New York, Los Angeles, Chicago, Las Vegas, Miami, those places.
Yeah.
And so in towns like Charleston, customers were becoming more interested, and I really benefited from that timing as I look back. And the product that I started making when I was at Fig, I created this brand around it named after my great grandfather, and it really just took off and took a life of its own. And here we are now a decade later, and last year, or about a year and a half ago, I took a big step back from the daily operation of the restaurants to focus my time on Jack Rudy even more than I had been. So it's been a crazy year for online, e-commerce business, and we've certainly benefited from that. And we've got a lot of fun things on the horizon as well. So
Yeah, I've seen like you guys have been you've been adding some different product lines. I know kind of like expanding into, from cocktails and mixers into the kitchen a little bit.
we have, yeah, cocktails, that'll always be our huckleberry. That's what we're known for. But as my interest in cooking grew even stronger, I really wanted to showcase. I've got a passion for great products, whether that's great ingredients coming from a farm or an awesome peanut butter. I love to shout it from the rooftops and share it with people. It just really makes me excited. And so I realized that there were some product categories that I felt like we could enter with Jack Rudy and create this kind of pantry extension and do something kind of new and cool. And I knew that our customers, after 10 years, had learned that everything we do is quality and carefully produced. And, we're not just putting out junk. And that's one of the things tonight. We've been making that sweet tea syrup for several years now. It actually started because of a drink that I made at Leon's, one of my restaurants here in Charleston, and I was making a sweet tea syrup for it. And the reaction was great. And I said, well, this is an amazing testing ground for new products. And
Sure.
So we bottled that, and that's been, several years ago. And it's funny because just in the last year and a half, that product's really started to take off.
I can imagine. It's probably my favorite that you guys make. I like that elderflower one too, as well.
Yeah, appreciate that.
That's
yeah,
really good.
Tonic. That's one of our long time products.
Yeah.
Yeah, and we've been on a tear this year. A lot of the products that we've been releasing have been sort of on paper that we wanted to do, but COVID hit. I closed down the restaurants for 2 months, and I called my partner and I was like, let's go full steam ahead with these things that we've wanted to do but we haven't. And now, so you're really seeing the fruits of that labor over the last few months, and we've got a number of products that we shipped off some labels to be printed today for a new product that's joining the kitchen line soon. So
very cool.
Yeah.
So I wanted to go back just a little bit to like the beginnings of Jack Rudy and you making that tonic at the restaurant and finding that to be very popular. Can you explain a little bit, like, I think most people, they order a gin and tonic and it's gin and just tonic is poured in there, and that's kind of what they're used to. What's the kind of added element or the difference between the tonic syrup and just tonic?
Yeah, the big difference when we created the tonic syrup was that the tonic that you would get at 98% of bars in America was one of the two big brands, Schweppes or Canada Dry.
Mm-hmm.
And the big difference is that theirs is made with high fructose corn syrup and flavors. And I think we all now know that we shouldn't be drinking high fructose corn syrup.
Mm.
And so it was really as simple as that. That was the big thing, was we were using real ingredients and cane sugar. So I was making the product, and we still make it this way, almost like a tea. We buy whole orange peel, whole lemongrass. We steep that, and of course sweeten it with cane sugar. So it's, that was the big thing that set us apart, and still to this day sets us apart. Now, we now have the carbonated tonic water as well, but the tonic syrup is still our number one seller. And it's for a few reasons, and I think that is that it's incredibly versatile. So there, just off the top of my head, we have three ways that we use it at one of my restaurants. We serve it in a traditional gin and tonic, which is the gin and the tonic syrup, and we add soda water for the bubbles. We have it as a frozen gin and tonic, where we add gin, syrup, and water to a frozen drink machine, and it freezes.
Very nice.
And then we also have a drink called a gin and tonic turbo, a G&T turbo, which is gin shaken with tonic syrup and lemon juice.
Oh.
And so I say that because the syrup gives you this versatility across a number of applications. When we used to do events, we would carbonate a whole keg of gin and tonic, and we would serve that on tap. And so all those applications, with a traditional bottle of carbonated tonic, the only thing you can do is a gin and tonic.
Right.
And
Yeah.
this syrup allows you to not only explore the nuance within that range, but it also allows you to make something a little sweeter if you'd like, or a little drier with less syrup. So I think as people took an interest in mixing drinks at home, we really just benefited from that movement and continue to. And because we were really the first, I think, fortunately for us, we're the strongest, and that's really been great.
So, speaking of strongest, you are distributed pretty much everywhere. I think, like everywhere I've ever been, I've seen Jack Rudy. Are you like 50 states?
We're not 50 states. I can never remember, but we're not in North Dakota, South Dakota, Wyoming, Montana. So, but those states also are not densely populated across
Right.
the state, There are, of course, cities within there, but then small towns. My mother-in-law lived in Florence, Montana, and it was like a stretch of road with 10 people on it. So,
Right.
so they're not huge markets for us, although we'd love to be there. But we're in roughly 42 states or so.
Okay,
And then
yeah.
we also distribute overseas as well.
Very cool. One other thing I wanted to mention about the tonic, really all of your syrups that I found, even just taking a little bit of the tonic and pouring, plain sparkling water over the top of it is like a perfect just, Saturday afternoon drink, just like
Mocktail,
basically
yeah.
like a soda. It's
Totally.
so good for that too.
Well, my son, my 12-year-old son, and his cousin, his cousin was just over here this weekend visiting us, and he's 14, and the adults were having cocktails, and he came in and he was like, "Hey, can I have a mocktail?" Because since he's been coming over to my house since he was 6,
Yeah.
I've made him grenadine and soda water, and he gets to go pick out his favorite stir stick from my collection of like stirrers from different bars I've been to. And so anyway, yeah, it's the products have that versatility, and then of course, kids and non-drinkers love the cherries. They have a very small amount of alcohol in them, but not enough to catch a buzz.
No, that's great. It's a great one for kids as well. You mentioned those stir sticks. Are you like a collector of like any sort of
Am I?
um, are you a collector of any sort of thing like that, or like any barware? I know sometimes people get into like the mallets to crush ice and like
Right.
all kinds of stuff.
I had a moment with vintage barware, and I collected that, and I still have that in our storage facility. I collect the stir sticks, and I still
Yeah.
do. And then I've always collected menus, and
Oh.
I would say in my younger days, maybe I'm not proud of it, but if a menu I couldn't take it, I would just steal it. Of course, now that I'm in the restaurant business, I understand the costs of goods. And so now, I ask, can I have these have a copy I can take home? But I have two huge storage bins full of menus, and I love to leaf through them because it's great memories, but it's also inspiration for my own restaurants
Yeah.
and for graphic design and stuff as well.
Well, you mentioned that you've kind of been in restaurants since you were 16. What was the like inspiration for you, or like how did you come about your love for food and drink, and to be so interested in it that at 16 you were interested in working in a restaurant? Like where does that come from?
Yeah, well, I think the benefit of hindsight has given me some clarity on that because when I was 16, I'm not sure I would have known this, but there were a few things. My dad had been in the restaurant business briefly, and he had intended to go and open his own restaurant. He had a bar, he was a bartender, he managed bars and some restaurants. And so there was an element of that in the house when you would hear him talk about it. But at the time, that was not necessarily a big thing.
Sure.
Um, I think both of my parents enjoyed entertaining and still enjoy cooking. And so we never ate out as a family. Maybe we would have pizza delivered on Fridays
Yeah.
sometimes, but dinner was an event. We always sat at the table. We ate dinner at home every single night, a home cooked meal. And so the idea of gathering around the table and food was clearly something I was raised with. And because we had a family that lived nearby, we often had family coming over. So that was just around. And then, but when you're 16, the reason I ended up working in a restaurant in the first place is because a buddy of mine had a job as a busboy at the local country club. And he was like, "Hey, you want to get a job at the country club?" And I was like, "Yeah, sure, sounds great." And I wouldn't say I fell in love with the business there,
Yeah.
but I had enough experience to then go to college, and I needed a job to pay for stuff. And so I got a job at a restaurant because I had experience. It was a fancy place, and I really liked it. I
Mm.
think the moment that it all really clicked for me was on a trip to New York, and I was probably 20 years old at the time. I was in college. I bought a
Okay.
ticket to New York, and I went and visited some restaurants, and specifically the one that really I think impacted me at the time was Balthazar,
Mm.
which is of course has just reopened in New York, and it was just such a cinematic, transportive place,
Oh,
and I had this realization that the restaurant business could be such an incredibly creative um, business to be in. It wasn't
interesting.
simply just a bar and grill. You could tell a whole story. And because I was studying English and drama, storytelling was the thing I was most interested in at the time. I wanted to be a writer. I wanted to write plays. I liked making movies with friends. And so I think I was old enough to realize I wasn't going to be a professional playwright. And I realized, I think, that restaurants could give me a little bit of that taste, still make money, and utilize a talent that I had been sort of cultivating for a few years. And that was
Yeah.
really that was the full sort of circle.
I mean, that's really interesting. I love that when I asked you that question that you had enough, like you had thought about this enough to say like, well, when I was 16, I probably was, not realizing all the things that I'm looking back on now. Like to
Right.
have that presence of mind to be like, listen, I was 16. I
Exactly.
took the job because my friend, was working at the same place.
Right. Well, I
Um,
will say, I watched Food Network religiously,
ooh, yes.
and I loved, and honestly, I feel like the reason that I cook and that I can cook is not really from my parents. I actually think it's because of watching Jamie Oliver, Tyler Florence, and Bobby Flay. I
Wow.
loved watching their shows, and I remember recreating their dishes. And one time I had my buddies over, and I cooked a whole meal I had watched on Bobby Flay. And so anyway, it was a kind of a confluence of a number of things coming together that have kind of led me here where I am today.
Yeah. So would you say that those three chefs that you mentioned, just watching on Food Network, are like, those are like your basically kind of role models in cooking? Like if I was, looking back, I would be, I would say like a certain teacher I had when I was in high school was kind of a role model for me. Um, Plus, of course, things going around you. But would you say those three guys are like the inspiration for your cooking style? Because
I would say Jamie Oliver 100%. Yeah,
yes,
and still to this day, I'm a huge fan. And I loved that the way he cooked is in this now the way I cook. It was very loose, very easy. It was not hung up on measurements. He would be like, throw a daub of this and load up your pan with some olive oil and like a big dash of this. But he never really measured, and I loved it, and it felt like he was having fun. And so and that now cooking for me is very fun, very stress relieving, because I guess that's how I learned to cook. I'm not sacrosanct about measurements and all that stuff. And so yeah, he was a huge influence, and still to this day, I think he's an absolute genius. I love watching his Instagram, his shows, his cookbooks are amazing.
yeah.
Big fan.
Um, Speaking of your cooking, you during this quarantine started a show on Instagram, which you call Brooks Cooks. And when you say Jamie Oliver, I instantly knew you were going to say Jamie Oliver when I asked you that question, because when you watch your shows, you cook simply, like not
Yeah.
that you're making like really simple dishes. Although you do make really simple things, but they're made with really high quality ingredients. They're really fresh. But I could just tell, like, I feel like Jamie Oliver is like he's about making it as simple as possible, but it's still amazingly delicious. And I think,
Yeah.
tell me if I'm wrong, but I get that feeling like when you're doing your episodes, that's kind of how you go about cooking for real.
You hit the nail on the head, honestly. I love simple food, and his style informed what we cook at the restaurants. And I'm constantly like when we're creating a new restaurant, new menu, concepting, um, I'm encouraging people to be as simple as possible with things. And I'm like, can we take this off? Can we take this off? Because really, you know, people, I believe, there's nothing better than a simply cooked piece of fish with some great olive oil, nicely cooked potatoes, and a little salsa verde. Like crazy,
Yep.
crazy simple, really pared down. And so that's the food that I love to eat. I'm never cooking anything fancy at the house. I'm not a fan of like project cooking. I don't bake bread or any of that stuff. For me, it's always like really simple, chop some veg, toss it in olive oil, roast it. Like
Yeah.
tonight we just had roasted vegetables with some feta cheese that was on top.
Very
Um,
nice.
so yeah, you're very perceptive. You can probably see his impact on me even today.
It's very interesting. But, a couple of things that I also wanted to point out about your show is that it's very relatable because I was watching earlier today, I was watching the pepperonata video when you were
Yeah,
making pepperonata. And you're cutting, you're showing people, how you're slicing the peppers. And you say, you know what, normally like in a restaurant setting, this white interior kind of pithy part, we'd get rid of that. But hey, at home, you know what, you just cut right through that and you throw it in the pan. And that's exactly what, I do. That's exactly what everyone does. People don't take the
right.
time at home to rip that out and whatever. So it's very relatable in that way.
Yeah, I'm happy to hear that because that was, and when I resumed the show, when I have more time, now that COVID sort of waning, I'm
Yeah.
busy, very busy. But yeah, that's to me, I love to um, illustrate how simple great food can be. And it's I always love we'll have guests over, friends of ours, and I love cooking vegetables, and they'll often comment like, God, I cannot make my vegetables taste this good. How do you do it? And I just love turning people on to techniques and new products and all that kind of stuff.
Yeah, you can really tell. Um, I wanted to ask you a little bit more about Jack Rudy. Um, like this past year, you had mentioned that it's really been busy with Jack Rudy. I can imagine people at home buying online. Did you see like any? I'm wondering by like what people were buying. Like if you pay attention to that, like did you see any sort of like trend that would lead you to believe like people were making this or people are more interested in X?
Not necessarily. I would say our bar tool sales took off, so
Mm,
it was clear that people were mixing more at home and taking an interest, and that was at the same time I was doing more videos about that too. But I mean, overall, I would say no, I couldn't glean any particular trend other than the trend that people were still
a lot
drinking
more. Yeah.
and buying things online. And I think um, the of course the discussion about what has it led to in our world is a very that's very complicated discussion,
Yes,
right?
very
but
much so.
but there are some really positive things it has wrought for business, specifically online business, and Jack Rudy has benefited from that because people are now buying groceries online. They're buying, my online shopping has gone through the roof for different pantry staples. All of our CSA and our vegetables we're now buying online through a local farm. So I think we got really lucky, and I'm hoping, of course, that trend doesn't slow down.
Sure. Yeah. Um, so you've been really busy during this past year. You were doing Brooks Cooks. You've had this growth in Jack Rudy, but you also, I saw you started a newsletter on Substack.
Correct.
A small, simple thing. Is that what you call it?
That's right. Yeah.
So tell us, I mean, this other little project that you're doing, tell us a little bit about that. Like what are you doing in the newsletter?
Yeah. I write a weekly newsletter on Substack, which is, it's for anyone like, I guess, who's like me that follows all this stuff closely. It's been in the news a lot lately, but for the uninitiated, it's a newsletter website basically where you can create your own newsletter content and
Hmm.
send it out to subscribers who subscribe to what you have to say. The cool thing, I think, as a whole, is that I think media and people's media diets are becoming more and more niche.
Yes.
Magazines are struggling, but small creators and content creators are thriving and growing sort of micro audiences. And that just seeing that happen was very interesting. I saw the impact that the cooking show had, and I realized that I had what I felt like was a really interested audience, really engaged. And I felt like, oh, wow, I have all these people who are, they're into what I have to say. And it was very flattering. And that kind of led me to, well, how could I share with them in a more meaningful way beyond just an Instagram caption? And so I started this newsletter, a small and simple thing. I named it that just to kind of under promise a little bit so that maybe I can over deliver. Although I do charge for the newsletter, it's $5 a month. And it was just an opportunity for me to sharpen the tool of my writing, which I hadn't been writing for several years. And I wanted to start writing again. And I knew if I charged people, I would have to deliver. Because if I just did it for free, then if I didn't feel like doing it, I'd probably be like, no, I'm not going to do it. I'm not, it's free.
Yeah.
So can you really complain if it's free? But you can complain if you're paying for it. And so I wanted that fire under my butt to do it. And it's been really fun. I started a few months ago, and it's just an opportunity to explore all the things that are interesting to me. Of course, food and drink and entrepreneurship and tech and music and culture and travel and family and all the things that interest me on a daily basis.
Sure.
And I can just kind of wax poetic about them to a relatively small audience. But it's been really fun. I'm loving it.
That's very cool. Do you, like, when you send out that letter, do you get like a lot of communication back and forth from people kind of responding to what you've written every week?
It grows each week. I think this last time I got 6 responses on email, someone who, just replied to the email, which was more, I have about 300 subscribers who pay for the newsletter.
Yeah.
But, it started out, no one replied. And then it was like 1 or 2, 3 or 4. And I get a few new subscribers each week. So I feel the kind of like, I kind of feel it going in the right direction. So I'm excited to continue and just kind of see where that format leads, share with people what I'm doing with Jack Rudy, offer them special discounts, and kind of dig into things a little deeper.
Yeah, I like it. I like the concept. I wanted to go back. I know I'm kind of jumping all around here, but something just reminded me of, you had mentioned like the whole idea of going to Balthazar and it being like a performance in the restaurant. Your 3 restaurants in Charleston, are they each their own kind of performance that you've thought about and created?
Big time. Very, very different. Yeah. And that's so important because they're literally on the same block. So you couldn't, it would be a very dangerous business proposition to have, restaurant A that's really similar to restaurant B next door and it's owned by the same person,
Yeah.
So we were really thoughtful about the differences and the time of day you would use each and the kind of day. Like one of the restaurants on a sunny, pretty day, there's nowhere else you'd rather be in the world. The other one, on a rainy, cold, shitty day, nowhere else you'd rather be, So like when one might be not so great, the other is thriving and vice versa. And the service style is a little bit different at all 3 of them. The food is different and the price points are all different. So on any given night, if you walked into one of the 3 restaurants, you'd see a completely different sort of cross section of Charleston.
Oh yeah, very interesting. Just based on the sort of, I don't want to say theme, but the style of the restaurant.
Yeah, totally. And I don't mind theme. I would say they are quite thematic in many ways. So and they're theatrical, and I think kind of transportive.
Yeah. Now, isn't one of them, I think I read or heard you say, I think it was Leon's, is very like, you have like a music vibe going on there, like you kind of set the tone through the music. Is that Leon's?
Yeah, Leon's is it's our first restaurant. It's a fried chicken and oyster joint. It's kind of a jumping, kind of New Orleans-y vibe, sort of juke joint kind of thing. And we play, we actually, when we opened and for the first several years, we played exclusively music from New Orleans jazz and soul musicians. But after like 5 years, I was like, I'm out of songs. I have no more songs to find that I haven't like tapped. So a couple years ago, I actually hired a professional firm, which is a group of DJs that curates the playlist now. But for the first several years, I was doing it all. And I just like tapped out my musical knowledge at some point. But yeah, music is a strong, it sets the tone there. Everything's very like positive, jumpy, vibey. I like it to be a little louder there. You know, that's also a business because it's not a cheap restaurant, but it's not inexpensive either. But it's important for the business model that people kind of eat relatively quickly. You know?
Yeah, right.
Like the more people we can serve, the better the business. Yeah. And so that music is a little louder. It gets kind of rocking, and it makes you kind of go a little bit faster. You know.
I like that. It's interesting. Someone is asking, what are the 3 restaurants? So it's Leon's, Melfi's, and Little Jack's, right?
Yeah, Little Jack's Tavern. Yep.
Okay. So those are the 3. Oh, someone actually typed it after I just said that. So it's there in the chat. Well, should we get to making a little cocktail?
Making a cocktail? Yeah.
Yeah.
Perfect. I'm gonna put my phone down here. This is always, it's interesting making drinks when you're on an Instagram live because I need to find some sort of like steady cam that's just attached to me.
Yeah, right.
So we're gonna make something with the sweet tea syrup. Cheers. And this product is probably, I would say this is about 4 to 5 years old. And again, we made this because I had created a drink at Leon's, and we made a sweet tea syrup. It was a really popular drink that we still serve, and so I decided to bottle it. And the drink we're going to make today is called a Dad's drink. You know, it's a bourbon cocktail. Bourbon and sweet tea is such a southern. Those are such 2 southern ingredients. So anyway, we'll get rolling.
Well, we're using the sweet tea, and I just wanted to point out to everyone the ingredients in this and how simple and clean this is. Water, cane sugar, black tea, citric acid. I mean, it's as simple as it can get. I mean, there's no garbage in there. There's no caramel coloring. It's just all natural.
Yeah, I mean, it's basically like a really potent tea sweetened with sugar. It's very, very simple.
Yeah.
So we're gonna do. I'm actually gonna do 2 ounces of booze.
2 ounces. All right. I should put some ice in the shaker that I have here, huh?
Yeah, I'm gonna do the same. I'm gonna snag my ice.
So we're both going to be using, for everyone out there, we're going to be using Blade and Bow because Brooks and I had this bottle in common. I think I've seen you making a few cocktails with the Blade and Bow on Brooks Cooks a couple of times.
I mean, I'm friends with several folks over there, and I hosted a derby party with them a couple years ago.
Oh, nice.
And as I mentioned to you, you know, these days, my liquor collection is relatively small because I have a 16-month-old. I'm not drinking a lot. So I'm sort of like whatever I've been given as a gift is what I have on hand.
Yeah.
Well,
this is a good one. This is a good one.
That's great.
I actually like this, that we're using this, because I feel like there's some flavors in the Blade and Bow that go really, really nicely with a tea. There's like a peach, there's like an apricot kind of flavor to Blade and Bow. There's even kind of a little bit of an oak influence to it, and it just goes with tea. It's so good.
See, I knew you were going to say that. That's why I chose this. So I did 2 ounces of bourbon, and then I
All
did
right.
3/4 ounce or 0.75 ounces of tea syrup and fresh lemon.
All right. So let me get that syrup.
And I will say we make our own bar tools at Jack
Oh.
Rudy. So this is our Jack Rudy jigger, and then I've got our cocktail shaker here. You can see our inscription on there of the
Very nice.
logo. So I'm going to go ahead and just throw the top on this. I'm going to shake mine up.
All right. I will be right behind you. I got the. Ooh, that's good and cold. So I got a little ice ball here I'll throw in.
Yeah, normally I would strain over fresh ice, but about an hour ago I realized that I didn't have any ice made. So
That's
I went
totally
over
fine.
the shaker ice.
So you just go with the. Hey, that's, you know what? I feel like that's
a Jamie Oliver style drink.
That's a Brooks Cook. I think you actually did that on one of your episodes. You just went shaker ice right in.
Cheers to you, friend.
Cheers to you.
And to everyone watching. Thank you for having me.
Yes, thanks for coming by. And just so everyone knows, again, we made the Dad's Drink, which you get the recipes right on the bottle of this Jack Rudy sweet tea syrup. Super, super, super simple cocktail. That is, again, we have this theme of simplicity, but that is like, that's the only way I want to make a cocktail. If it's that easy, you know, 2 ingredients besides the bourbon, just so easy to do and exactly what you want, you know, on a day after work, you know, when you come home in the summertime with this.
Yeah, I mean, you can certainly get more complex, but I think, like you're saying, you know, if I go to a cocktail bar, that's when I want to have something that's nuanced and perhaps more complicated and 3, 4, 5 ingredients. But at home, I just want to keep it really simple. And, you know, we have our margarita mix that we released over the summer. You just shake equal parts tequila and margarita mix. It is so freaking good. And it couldn't be easier. I mean, I drank a margarita, I probably like 64 days in a row. I drank a margarita every day at 5 o'clock after we released it. And every day I would like walk around the house telling my family, I was like, this is so freaking good. Oh my God, we nailed it. But I think it's important to keep it simple.
Yeah. Someone is asking me, I ask people for questions, and someone had a good question. I don't know if you'll know this or not, but when it comes to like liqueurs and, you know, going with this cocktail theme and mixers and tonic syrups and stuff like this, how do you know like when that stuff has gone like in the wrong direction and started to go bad? Because I feel like, you know, you buy this, you know, bottle of liqueur and it's huge, and you're buying it to, you know, to make one drink, and then like the bottle sits there forever because you don't make that drink ever again.
Right.
Like, do you know anything about that? Like
Yeah, well, I mean, I know as much as my experience has taught me, and of course I'm not a scientist, but you know, liqueurs are fortified with alcohol.
Yep.
So the chances of those going bad, like a Cointreau or a Saint Germain elderflower liqueur, and you know, any liqueur that's got alcohol in it, the chances of that going bad are slim to none. And so my very sort of non-science thing would be like, it's not going to go bad.
Yeah.
Now, mixers and things like ours, if you know, when they're opened, after they're opened, they should go in the fridge. Generally, the pH level of our stuff is, you know, some people leave it out, but I keep all my stuff in the fridge. I actually have a portion of my fridge where somebody might keep their like dairy. It's all Jack Rudy stuff.
All right.
And our stuff is good. Well, different for different products, but generally speaking, it's good at least a year from the date that you open it.
Yeah.
So you just got to keep it in the fridge.
Yeah,
And I
that's a
guess,
good tip.
yeah. And the telltale sign would be that if it has mold on it, I wouldn't drink it.
But remember, he's not a scientist, so.
Yeah, don't take my word for it, ladies and gentlemen.
Someone
I'll be
just
giving
asked.
stock tips next.
We'll be moving markets like Elon Musk.
Right.
Someone just asked, what's your favorite way to use the elderflower syrup?
Love the elderflower syrup two ways. Love it in just a classic blank and tonic. So whether that's gin and tonic, a vodka tonic, rum and tonic, tequila and tonic. But then I like to do I mentioned the G&T Turbo. I like to do that, but with tequila. So I'll do 2 ounces of tequila and then 3/4 of an ounce of tonic syrup, 3/4 of an ounce of lime, and shake that up and drink that. It's almost kind of almost like an elderflower margarita.
Yeah, I could see tequila, especially if one has like a little like floral element to it. Really, like those two together, like you just have like a really fresh kind of cocktail from that
very
combination.
Bright.
Yeah, very bright.
Our lavender bitters in there would be great as well to kind of layer on some of that floral element.
Absolutely. So you guys have that lineup of bitters now too. Are those fairly recent for you?
We've been making the aromatic for many years now. The lavender bitters for several years. We just added orange.
Oh.
And then in the pipeline we have a cherry and a grapefruit coming out in the coming months as well.
Very nice.
So we're building on to the bitters. I think as with many things now, 10 years in, we've learned a lot of lessons. And originally there were a lot of people making bitters, and we kind of felt like, well, if there are so many people making bitters, do we need to be making bitters? But now, this many years in, we've learned, A, people love our bitters and they're very popular, and B, people are really coming to us looking for us to be kind of an answer for a lot of things in their home bar. Rather than having to go to 6 different vendors, they'd rather just come to one that they trust. And, and knock on wood, everything that we make, it sells. We've never made a product that was a dud that we had to stop producing or that didn't sell. And so we've realized, as long as we continue that important sort of guiding light of quality, and we get that, then it'll do great. So we're building out the bitters portfolio right now, slowly but surely. And, that'll be great because we can do bitters boxes, and you can do a gift set for someone and get several types of bitters. And so lots of exciting things in the works there.
Very cool. Do you have since, the tonic syrup is kind of like the flagship, do you have a gin that you prefer to use with your syrup?
Yes. Well, I like a lot of different gins, but I'll say if I was forced to pick one, in an homage to my grandmother, I would say Beefeater.
Oh, classic.
Because it's super classic, still made the same way, incredibly delicious. London dry gin. I think it's a benchmark against which you should judge many other dry gins. And I love it. And it's kind of to me, it's what gin should taste like in terms of a classic gin. And then, of course, you can go in so many directions, like Hendrick's, which has the cucumber and the rose petal, or you can, it gets rich and varied now, the gin landscape. But I always come back to Beefeater. That's what I use for Negronis in the restaurants and what I use at home for my Negronis. So I think that's the best if you're just going to have one.
Yeah, that's amazing.
Yeah. Are you a gin drinker?
I've been dabbling a little bit. Haven't really found, anything that I've really, really liked, but I should just go buy a bottle of Beefeater.
Totally. I mean, I would say if you have Beefeater and you're like, this sucks,
then I shouldn't drink gin.
You're probably not a gin drinker
Yeah.
at the end of the day, you know?
That's actually a good litmus test.
Exactly. Truly, I think it is.
That's good. So if like what is sorry to go down the gin rabbit hole here, but if you were gonna make a gin, like if you made a gin, is there a certain like flavor profile or a certain, yeah, basically a certain flavor that you would want to be like kind of the main or lead flavor in your gin?
Well, you know, hopefully my business partner's not mad at me for like divulging any trade secrets, but because we have batted around making a gin at some point. But what I'll say is, for me, super important to have that backbone of juniper. I just that juniper flavor is for me what gin is.
Yeah.
And I just like when you have that marriage of juniper and the tonic together, it's just insane. But if I were making my own, in addition to that, I would, because of my upbringing in Kentucky, really informs a lot of what we do. And my business partner is in Kentucky. They're in Lexington, and so I think that I would use two things that grow wild in Kentucky. It's going to surprise you that they grow wild. One of them probably will. First would be honeysuckle, and that grew at the back of our farm, just 500 feet from my house on the fence line.
Yeah.
We would go back there as kids and pluck the little honeysuckle buds and eat them. So I would use honeysuckle, and then elderflower, which grows wild in Kentucky. And a friend of my parents, makes elderflower wine from elderflower that he harvests along the train track in our town. So I love to me, when something is anchored in some sort of real memory or you know, something that means something to you, it's so much better. There's just, to me, if it has that story and it's authentic, it makes it really great for the customer. And so those would be my two things: elderflower and honeysuckle.
Oh wow, I like that. I hope that you come out with this gin.
Thank you. Well, never say never. It's something we'd like to do. We'd like to have a proper line of spirits at some point. But as you probably know, it's very expensive and fraught with a lot of regulatory stuff. And right now in the non-alc space, it's very easy compared to having to deal with, like the governmental, stuff to create liquor.
Yeah, absolutely. I could definitely see that being much more of a painstaking process. Well, Brooks, I just, I don't want to take up your whole evening. I want to thank you very, very much for doing this. I had a really fun time talking to you. I think you have a lot of really great insights into a lot of things. So I appreciate you sharing and just sitting here and chatting for this past almost hour. So thank you very much for that.
Thank you. Thanks for having me on. I'm flattered. And we didn't even get to really talk bourbon, so we've got to follow up offline, and I want to hear about your picks.
Absolutely.
But I really appreciate you having me, and to everyone who tuned in, thank you so much for spending part of your evening with me.
Absolutely. Thank you, everyone, for watching. And Brooks, if you're ever coming up to Chicago, please reach out, and we'll have to grab a gin and tonic or a bourbon somewhere.
Count on it. Thank you for that.
All right. Cheers.
Okay.
Thanks, Brooks.
Cheers.
Have a great evening.
Bye-bye.
Take care. Well, thanks, everyone, for tuning in. That was such a fun conversation with Brooks. Like I said, I feel like he has a lot to say about so many things and so very insightful. What a great guest and great conversation, and hope to have him back again sometime in the future. But until next time, guys, stay tuned for the next Urban Bourbon Hour. Cheers.